You are standing on a hill. The air smells like smoke and something older than smoke, like stone that has burned so many times it has forgotten what cold feels like. Below you, a city is dying. Soldiers are screaming in 3 different languages. A bell is ringing, not in celebration, not in mourning, just ringing because someone pulled the rope and then ran. The city below you has a name that 3 of the world's largest religions will kill for. And tonight it is on fire. For the 7th time. You would think, by now, the people inside would have given up. They haven't. They never do. And by the end of this, you will understand exactly why, and it will change the way you think about what survival actually means. In 1095, a pope stands in an open field in France and tells a crowd something that may or may not be entirely true. He tells them Jerusalem is being desecrated, that pilgrims are being slaughtered on the roads, that God himself is personally calling for war. The crowd doesn't ask for evidence. They need a reason to move, not a reason to think. Within months, tens of thousands of people, knights, farmers, priests, women, children who should be home playing in the mud, are walking east. No professional logistics. No supply chain. No real plan beyond faith and iron and the terrifying human ability to believe that God is specifically on your side and no one else's. Thousands die before they even reach the first battle. They eat horses. Then leather. Then things history politely does not record in detail. 3 years later, what survives of this army stands outside the walls of Jerusalem in the punishing summer heat. They have walked over 3,000 miles. Their boots are rags wrapped in more rags. And there it is, the golden dome catching the morning light like it was placed there specifically to mock them. The siege lasts 5 weeks. When the walls finally break, what happens inside those streets is not holy. The chroniclers who were physically present write that blood ran ankle-deep in the alleyways. Jewish families burn inside their own synagogue. Muslim civilians are cut down inside their mosque. One Crusader writes home calling it a miracle of God. You can decide what you think of that word. But this is not the worst part. The men who took Jerusalem were French lords, Norman knights, Italian merchants. They understood warfare. They did not understand governance. They did not know the climate. They did not know what crops grew in the soil beneath them. They did not speak the language. They did not understand the water systems that kept the population alive. And most of the army, their vow to God completed, their pilgrimage finished, simply turned around and walked home. What remained was almost nothing. A few hundred knights. A handful of lords already arguing about who gets to sit on a throne that didn't yet exist. A population of traumatized survivors inside a city surrounded on 3 sides by people who had just watched their families be slaughtered. The kingdom of Jerusalem was not born in triumph and glory. It was born in panic and improvisation and the quiet desperation of men who had won something they weren't sure they could keep for a single winter. And yet, somehow, it survived. Because this strip of land, sitting at the exact crossroads between east and west, between the Mediterranean and the spice routes of Asia, was worth more than any army could calculate. Every merchant moving between Asia and Europe passed through here. Every pilgrim moving toward the sacred sites passed through here. The kingdom that held this coastline held the flow of half the world's commerce. The Crusader lords figured that out with remarkable speed and they built accordingly. They raised castles so massive and so geometrically sophisticated that modern structural engineers still study their design. Krak de Chevaliers. Krak. Belvoir. Sitting on a cliff above the Jordan Valley, engineered so that 300 men could hold back an army of thousands indefinitely. And quietly, in ways that would have genuinely horrified the Pope who began all of this, they started to negotiate. Some Crusader lords made trade agreements with Muslim neighbors. Some sealed truces. Some sat across tables sharing meals with men they were technically at war with and discussed shared economic interests like practical businessmen. The children born inside this kingdom grew up speaking Arabic and French in the same sentence, wearing linen in the brutal summer heat, knowing both the saints of the church and the names of the local markets. Something entirely new was emerging in the desert. A civilization that belonged to no single tradition and borrowed from all of them. It had never existed before. But history, as always, was not finished with it yet. And then, out of the east, comes a man who has been watching this kingdom very carefully. And he is patient in a way that should terrify you. His name is Saladin. Forget the version Hollywood gave you. The real man is more dangerous and more interesting than any film has captured. He is Kurdish, born in a garrison town, raised inside the fracturing politics of the Islamic world at a moment when every power is fighting every other power for dominance. He rises through that chaos. He unites Egypt and Syria under his authority, something no one had accomplished in generations, through military genius, political intelligence, and a quality of long patience that only comes when you are playing for something larger than personal glory. He watches the kingdom of Jerusalem rot from within for years. He watches its lords fight each other over titles and land and the throne itself. He watches the decision-making deteriorate. And in 1187, the kingdom hands him the moment he has been waiting for with almost suicidal generosity. A reckless lord named Reynald of Chatillon has spent years breaking truces, raiding caravans, attacking Muslim pilgrim routes, doing everything in his power to start a war the kingdom is not prepared to fight. The kingdom's most experienced military mind, Raymond of Tripoli, tells the king with complete clarity, "Do not march in summer, do not cross the open plateau without water, wait and let Saladin come to you where you hold the advantage." The king ignores him. The army of Jerusalem marches into July heat across a waterless plateau toward a city Saladin is besieging. Saladin simply closes the water sources behind them and waits. That night, the desperate soldiers try lighting the dry grass on fire to create smoke cover. The wind shifts. The smoke rolls back over their own lines. By morning, the entire army of Jerusalem is choking inside metal armor, blinded by smoke and thirst, unable to form a coherent fighting formation. The battle at the Horns of Hattin lasts a few brutal hours. The entire field army of the kingdom is destroyed. The king is captured. The true cross, the relic they carried into battle as a divine guarantee of protection, is seized. Saladin walks into Jerusalem 3 months later. And here is where history does something unexpected. He does not repeat 1099. He orders his soldiers to ransom the Christian civilians rather than kill them. Churches are not burned. The Patriarch of Jerusalem is allowed to leave. Saladin stands at the gates of the holiest city in the Christian world and demonstrates a restraint that the Crusaders themselves had not managed 88 years earlier. The first fall is complete. The kingdom of Jerusalem, by every logical measure, is finished. Except it isn't. And what keeps it alive is something no one sees coming. A single ship arrives at the harbor of Tyre. On it, a man named Conrad of Montferrat, sailing toward Acre to visit the city. He arrives to discover Acre has already fallen to Saladin. So he sails north to Tyre, the last significant Crusader port still standing, and finds the governor has already agreed to hand the city over. Conrad tears the agreement apart with his hands. He takes command. He tells Saladin to come and take the city by force if he wants it. Saladin comes. His fleet is destroyed in the harbor. The land assault fails repeatedly. He withdraws. One man on one ship making one refusal, and the kingdom survives by the width of a harbor wall. This is what keeps the entire story moving. Not grand armies or papal decrees. Individual stubbornness at precisely the right moment in precisely the right place. News of Hattin reaches Europe, and eventually the Third Crusade assembles and arrives, and with it comes Richard I of England, a personality that was essentially a natural disaster wearing armor. He moves his army down the coast in a formation so disciplined that Saladin's cavalry harasses it for weeks without breaking it. He wins the field battle at Arsuf. He marches toward Jerusalem. And then he stops. Because Richard, beneath all the aggression, can think clearly. He understands what the original Crusaders never grasped. Taking a city you cannot hold is not a victory, it is a delayed defeat. If he takes Jerusalem, he loses it within a decade because the kingdom lacks the manpower to garrison it and the supply lines from Europe are too fragile to sustain a defense. So he does the harder thing. He sits across a table from Saladin and they negotiate. The Treaty of Jaffa, 1192, Christians may visit freely, the coastal strip returns to Crusader control, Saladin keeps Jerusalem. Two enemies choosing the difficult and pragmatic thing over the glorious and destructive thing. The kingdom lives again. Smaller. Weaker, but alive. But surviving is not the same as thriving. And what the kingdom does next is the thing kingdoms should never do. The kingdom of Jerusalem in the 13th century is recognizable the way a seriously ill man is recognizable. You can see who he used to be, but something has gone wrong in the center. The capital is now Acre, a port city of perhaps 40,000 souls, magnificent and deeply corrupt in equal measure. The throne passes between claimants so rapidly that chroniclers lose track of who is technically king on any given year. The military orders, the Hospitallers, the Templars, the Teutonic Knights, have grown so powerful and so independent that they function as private states inside the state, with their own armies, their own foreign policies, their own private conflicts with each other that sometimes turn violent in the public streets. The Italian merchant republics of Genoa and Venice go to actual open combat in the streets of Acre over trading rights, destroying entire city neighborhoods, killing civilians, burning warehouses full of goods from 3 continents. History records it as the War of St. Sabas. It lasts for years. And then, in 1229, something so strange happens that contemporaries do not know how to process it. The Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II, excommunicated by the Pope, twice, arrives in the Holy Land. He speaks Arabic. He corresponds with Islamic philosophers and scholars. He sits across a table from the Egyptian Sultan and through pure diplomatic negotiation, without a single battle, without a single sword drawn, gets Jerusalem returned to Christian control. The church is furious. The Crusaders in Jerusalem celebrate by throwing garbage at him in the streets because he is too strange, too willing to treat the enemy as a rational human being rather than a symbol of evil. He leaves in disgust. The kingdom wastes what he gave it. And now the horizon fills with something that makes every previous threat look manageable by comparison. Baghdad falls in 1258. The House of Wisdom, the greatest library and intellectual center of the Islamic world, is destroyed. Contemporary accounts describe the Tigris running black with ink from the books thrown into it. The caliph is rolled in a carpet and trampled. The Mongols are not an army. They are a geological event, a force that has already erased entire civilizations and is continuing to move west without apparent limit. The Crusader lords calculate their options and declare neutrality, allowing the Mongol forces to pass through their territory, hoping the Mongols and the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt will destroy each other completely. At the Battle of Ain Jalut in 1260, the Mamluks stop the Mongols. The westward expansion ends. But the Mamluks have now been forged in the fire of stopping what seemed unstoppable. And their sultan, a man named Baybars who began his life as a slave, has not forgotten who helped the Mongols cross. He begins taking the Crusader cities methodically. Caesarea falls. Arsa falls. Safed falls. Jaffa falls. Antioch, one of the great founding principalities of the Crusader world, falls in 1268. Baybars writes a letter to the Count of Tripoli describing the massacre at Antioch in precise, almost administrative language. He is not boasting. He is informing. He wants the Count to understand with absolute clarity what is moving toward him. The walls of the kingdom, built and rebuilt across 2 centuries at enormous cost, are coming down one by one. And this time there is no Conrad, no Richard, no Frederick. There is only Acre left. And behind Acre, the open sea. But the end, when it comes, reveals something about these people that everything before it only hinted at. April 5, 1291. The Mamluk Sultan al-Ashraf Khalil arrives outside the walls of Acre with an army contemporary sources estimate between 60 and 100,000 men. Inside, perhaps 15,000 defenders, most of them civilians who have nowhere to go. For 6 weeks the walls hold. The defenders can hear the Mamluk siege engines working through every night without pause. Enormous catapults named the Furious, the Victorious, the Wrathful, and they can feel each impact as a vibration rising through the stone. On May 18th a tower collapses. The outer wall breaks in 2 places. The Mamluk army floods through both gaps simultaneously. What follows is not a rout. It is something more terrible, a controlled, desperate, street-by-street retreat toward the harbor, with soldiers dying on every corner buying the people behind them 60 more seconds to reach the boats. The military orders fall back into their fortified compounds and hold. They hold for hours after the rest of the city is already lost. The Templars hold their compound for 10 full days after the wall broke, until the building is finally undermined from below and collapses, taking attackers and defenders down together into the rubble. The harbor fills with boats loaded far beyond their capacity. People in the water. People on the burning docks watching the boats pull away without them. The Patriarch of Jerusalem drowns when his boat sinks. Weighed down by church treasure he refuses to release. Some people make it to Cyprus. Many do not. The Kingdom of Jerusalem, 2 centuries after its birth, slips beneath the surface of the eastern Mediterranean. And is gone. Or is it? The title King of Jerusalem was claimed by European monarchs for 500 years after 1291. passed through marriages and legal inheritance long after there was no kingdom, no throne, no city. An idea in a document, outlasting everything physical that had supported it. The Hospitallers retreated to Cyprus, then Rhodes, then Malta, where in 1565 they held off an Ottoman siege that should have ended them, and survived as a functioning order into the modern world. The legal frameworks the Crusaders built for governing a city where three religions coexisted left traces in European jurisprudence still studied today. The castle stand. Krak de Chevaliers is still whole enough today that T. Lawrence called it the finest castle ever built. And Jerusalem is still there. Still being prayed over in Arabic and Hebrew and Latin and Greek. Still drawing people toward it who cannot entirely explain the pull. The city that burned 7 times, taken and lost across 10 centuries by men absolutely certain that God was on their side, is still exactly where it always was. Unchanged. Patient. The smoke clears. A new morning comes over the walls. It always does. You were standing on that hill at the beginning. The smoke. The bells. The city burning. You wondered then how anything survives this much destruction. Now you know the answer is not walls, armies, or treaties. The answer is that some things, an idea, a name, a meaning that enough people agree to carry forward, are simply more durable than the forces sent to erase them. The most dangerous thing you can do to an idea is try to destroy it completely. Because every attempt leaves a mark the world keeps returning to look at. The question that doesn't have a clean answer, the one this story leaves behind like smoke in the morning air, is this. What would you have to believe in to keep rebuilding after the 7th time it all burns to the ground? Drop that answer in the comments. I read every single one.